Greetings, small group Bible study. It's good to see you again. Today it's time to brush up on your high school and college physics, specifically the second law of thermodynamics. Everything is subject to decay, and I mean everything. For instance, I never cease to be amazed by the amount of hair that falls into my bathroom counter each day, and that happens because both humanity and the universe are forced to operate under this same pesky little law. But the law exists for a good reason, several good ones actually, as Dr. Ross will now share with us in session number 6 of our 8-part series, If God Made the Universe, Why is it Decaying?
In this session, we'll be addressing the question, if God made the universe, why is the universe decaying so much? Given what the universe shows us about how precious we are to God, why does God subject us to such a high level of decay? I mean, God designed the universe for humanity's redemption and the conquest of evil. That's the primary reason God made the universe the way he did, to be a vehicle for our redemption and to bring about the end of all evil and suffering. And the primary reason that we see the physics that the universe manifests is that it's the optimal physics to bring about the defeat and the removal of evil, and for willing humans to receive redemption, eternal security, and an enhanced free will. Well, we're going to see in this session that in many respects our free will is restricted, enchained if you like, and God's goal is to deliver our free will to a much greater level of expression. Now, we see in the Bible, Romans 8, tells us that the whole creation groans, subject to its bondage to decay. Other translations say the entire universe. And in physics, there's no way we can separate the dimensions of space from the dimension of time. So when it says the entire universe, that means the universe from the very beginning, out to the very farthest reaches of this universe of 50 billion trillion stars. All of it is subject to this law of decay, what we physicists refer to as the second law of thermodynamics, or the law of entropy, how everything in the universe is decaying. But the thing that we're observing, both physically and spiritually, is the rate at which decay propagates within the universe is optimally fine-tuned. And it's fine-tuned in 4 different ways. What we see is that the rate of decay is optimal so that we can have the stars and planets that are necessary for life. So for example, if we lived in a universe where the rate of decay was less than what we observe, that would be a universe that would never produce stars and planets. The very production of stable burning stars requires an extremely high level of decay, but neither can it be too high. If it's too high, then the universe will never form stars either. It'll be nothing but gas. If it's too low, it's all black holes and neutron stars. If it's too high, you get nothing but gas. It must be extraordinarily fine-tuned so we get a universe with galaxies, stars, and planets. So that's one reason why the rate of decay must be exactly what we see in the universe. A second reason is that the rate of decay is optimal to allow plants and animals to function. You know, many of you probably had at least 2 meals today, and the very consumption of those meals requires a very high rate of decay to operate. It's thanks to the second law of thermodynamics that we can consume food and digest it and use that food so that we can perform useful work, like our heart beating and our lungs functioning and being able to lift things and take care of one another. Even eating our food, just lifting the fork up requires that high rate of decay. But what we're going to be talking about in this session is that we're also living in a universe where the rate of decay is optimized to restrain the expression of human evil. And if the rate of decay were any less than what it is, and then evil would run out of control. That we'll explore within a few minutes. But it's also the optimal level of decay to prepare human beings who desire to go for their future roles in a new creation. We have a certain occupation in this creation, but our occupation in the new creation the creation that will replace this universe, is going to be radically different. And right now, the laws of physics are set up in such a way as to prepare us in the shortest possible time and the most efficient way for our occupations in the new creation. Now let's look at this in a little more detail. The law of decay, or what we physicists call the second law of thermodynamics, is not so high as to prevent us or discourage us from performing useful work. I mean, everything that we do in terms of our workaday decays. I mean, you can look at my desk at my office. You can see a level of decay there. My wife always complains that I lack motivation to maintain our front and backyard. Well, one reason why that motivation wanes is every time I do yard work, it's only a few days before I got to do it all over again. The second law of thermodynamics makes sure that whatever maintenance I put in is short-lived. But I can tell you this, if the law of decay were even slightly higher, I would lose all motivation to do yard work. In fact, I would lose all motivation to do anything like write books or speak. I mean, what's the point? It would immediately decay away. But fortunately, the level of decay is not so high as to discourage us from creativity and doing work. But neither is it so low as to let human sin go unrestrained. Now, this is actually introduced quite early in the Bible. We have Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, where there was no sin or evil. They were in a perfect harmony and relationship in obedience to their Creator. But they chose to rebel against the authority of their Creator, and this was the introduction of sin and evil into the human experience. But notice what it tells us in Genesis 3. The very moment that Adam and Eve rebel against their Creator, God pronounces a curse. But in one respect, that curse is a blessing. The quote from Genesis 3, verse 17 to 19 is, "Cursed is the ground because of you. Through painful toil you'll eat of it. By the sweat of your brow you'll eat your food." And it goes on to explain that given that humanity is now in a state of rebellion against their Creator, with a propensity to commit sin and evil, humans will experience more pain. They'll experience more work. It's a consequence. Because of our sin, we mess things up, and it takes more pain and work to reverse the effects of our sin and our evil. But it's not that God changed the laws of physics. Jeremiah 33:25, "The laws that govern the heavens and the earth are fixed." 7 places in the Bible it tells us the moment that God creates the universe, it has fixed laws of physics. God didn't change the physics. He says, "Cursed is the ground because of you." The ground didn't change. Humanity changed. And because of the change in humanity, it now means that the ground is not as productive as it could have been if humans were not in a state of sin, for example. Well, let's look at this in a little more detail. In terms of how thermodynamics and all the laws of physics work, is that as we commit sin, it ruins the environment. It ruins our relationships with one another. In order to reverse the impact of the damage of our sin and evil, we experience more pain, more work, and more wasted time. And that's why, as a father, for example, when I work with my sons, I try to put discipline into their life. That means that they'll experience more pain, more work, and more wasted time. I remember my sons when they were young saying, they were kind of arguing with me about the discipline I was in bringing upon their life. And I said, well, if I don't discipline you so that you experience more pain, more work, and more wasted time, the laws of physics will step in. And the laws of physics really aren't that personal, and you'll wind up suffering more. And then I gave them a talk about how the laws of physics work to bring about more pain, more work, and more wasted time. And what they complained about is, "Dad, we'd rather just have the discipline than this lecture." That was actually the most painful thing and the most wasted time that we could have experienced. So sometimes a physics lecture really does have some benefit in that context. But there's another way the laws of physics work. They work to encourage people who are in authority to do what they can to restrain the expression of sin and evil. Because something else I observed with my sons as they were growing up is just how clever they were at transferring the consequences of their sinful ways to their mother or their father or to somebody else. And, we're all like that. We mess things up, but we make sure someone else cleans up after us rather than we doing the work ourselves. That's why God established human authority. We have police, we have parents, we have teachers, we have armies, and they're there to ensure that the perpetrators of the sin and the evil are the ones that experience more pain, more work, and more wasted time rather than society as a whole. And it works this way. If those of us in authority do not do what we can to make sure that the perpetrators experience this extra pain, extra work, and wasted time, guess who gets stuck with it? Those in authority. So it's a powerful motivation, because discipline's hard work. It's not easy disciplining our children, for example, or our workers, or whatever, people in society. It's hard work. But if we don't do it, then society as a whole will suffer, and we ourselves will suffer. So God has actually established the laws of physics in such a way as to give us the strongest motivation possible to refrain from committing evil and sin. Because the more we do it, the more pain, work, and none of us likes wasted time, extra work, or extra pain. And notice that in Genesis chapter 3. God did not say pain for the first time or work for the first time. He said extra work and extra pain. Work is good. Pain is good. Pain protects us from harm. And without pain, you wouldn't have the physical pleasure of touch. So it's not that these things are fundamentally bad, but God wants us to avoid having to experience unnecessary pain, work, and wasted time. But notice how well the laws of physics are set up to encourage us. But there's something else. These laws of physics are set in place to powerfully motivate us to avoid sin and evil because of the consequences physically. But it's also a way of teaching us we can't do it without God's help. Same way we say discipline our children as parents. We are there to help them get through their disciplinary problems. And we want them to recognize that they need our help. Or likewise with a professor with his students. The professor there is to help the students through their difficulties. And the laws of physics are in such a way as to teach us we can't do it without external help, and God's the only one that can help us through this problem. So it motivates us to come to Him in that context. Now, it's not just things like thermodynamics and gravity and electromagnetism, strong and weak nuclear force, the laws of physics that are set up to help us recognize the problem of sin and evil and to motivate us to avoid it. It's even true the space-time dimensions. We live in a universe with three large, rapidly expanding dimensions of space. And forgive me, and I'm ignoring the 6 tiny space dimensions that coincide or coexist with the 3 large dimensions. And then there's a single dimension of time. But notice what our time dimension is like. It's an unusual dimension of time in that it's one dimension only. We live in a single dimension of time, and it's a dimension of time that can't be reversed. Everything in physics tells us it's impossible to reverse the arrow of time. Time goes forward no matter what we do. We might be able to slow it down or speed it up, but we can't reverse it, and we can't stop it. Time is unstoppable, it's not reversible, and is one dimension only. But there's advantages in the context of sin and evil to living in a universe with 3 very large dimensions of space and a single dimension of time. What it does is it limits the potential for us to express the sinful desires we have in our heart. So for example, I might be really upset at someone that I know in Germany. But because of the spatial separation, I'm probably not going to be able to do anything to that person. I'm just too far away. It's going to cost me too much money to get there. I probably won't do it. Well, time, likewise, limits our human contacts. Because we're in a single dimension of time that can't be stopped or reversed, there's a limit to how many people I can have contact with. You know, I've met thousands of people around the world, but I don't spend very much time with those thousands of people I know overseas. Time limits me, and geography limits me. And then we have short lifespans. We only get to live 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 years. That's it. And so there's a limited amount of time that I have to have contact with different people. Now, one of the better examples of how space and time limits the expression of evil would be the lives of certain despots. I mean, Adolf Hitler is a good example. By 1944, he knew he was losing the Second World War. Now, being the evil kind of gentleman that he was, he did not take personal blame for losing the war. He blamed the German population. And in blaming the German population, he said that in his defeat, they must come down with me. He had actually concocted a plan that in losing the war would be the demise of 80 million Germans. We all know about him killing millions of Jews, but he also had in his heart a plan to kill off 80 million Germans because of the fact that they weren't worthy of his attention because they had lost the war for him. But, you know, 1944, 45, and especially in 45, he was on a mission to execute as many Germans as he could. But he found that space and time prevented him from carrying out all the executions that he had planned. He was on his train going to different places. There was only so many places he could get to. Moreover, the Allies were crushing in on him. He realized he didn't have much time. Then the doctors told him that he was dying of Parkinson's disease, and at most he had 3 years left. And so he began to do things that were counterproductive to his own goals. And it saved millions, if not tens of millions of lives. He only lived to be 56. And being confined in space and time, he was not able to kill and harm as many people as he had intended. And you could give a similar story for other despots throughout human history. And so we can be grateful for the fact that we humans don't live very long, and we can't get to very many places, and we're in a single dimension of time which limits our contacts with one another. You know, these limitations feel bad, but they're really all for our good. Let me read you something from Romans chapter 8, verse 21. It says, "The creation was subjected to frustration, not by its own choice, but by the will of the one who subjected it." So God was the one who personally imposed these laws of physics on the universe. By the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself would be liberated from its bondage to decay and brought into the glorious freedom of the children of God. Let me read on. "We know that the whole creation has been groaning as in the pains of childbirth right up to the present time. Not only so, but we ourselves, who are the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for our adoption as sons, the redemptions of our body." Now, you can read the rest of the chapter. What Romans 8:18 through to 25 is telling us is that God has subjected the entire universe to these laws of physics, in particular the law of decay. And keep in mind, the second law of thermodynamics is intimately linked with gravity, electromagnetism, and the strong and weak nuclear force. And these laws of physics will remain in place until the fullness of the number of people that will receive redemption has been reached. And when that happens, the laws of physics will have fulfilled their purpose, which is something we'll be investigating in the next session. So the creation was subjected by the will of the one who subjected it, that the creation itself would be liberated from its bondage to decay and at the glorious freedom of the children of God. And just to review for you what we've been covering, you know, I took a course from Carl Sagan when I was at the University of Toronto. And he started that course by saying, the universe is all there is or was or ever will be. If that is the case, given the physics of the universe, its ongoing expansion and the cooling down of the universe, there will come a time in the not too distant astronomical future when all stars will burn out, all metabolic reactions will cease, all life will die. And in the context of Carl Sagan's paradigm, that means that we human beings and all life within the universe that could possibly exist has no hope, no purpose, no possible ultimate destiny. If the universe is all there is, or was, or ever will be, then we are completely bereft of any purpose or any hope. But what we've been reviewing in these last several sessions is the scientific evidence, not just biblical evidence, but scientific evidence that we human beings must possess ultimate hope, purpose, and destiny. And just to give you a quick review here, we had a couple of sessions where he talked about we're at the ideal time to see all of cosmic history. And not only at the unique time, but the unique location. You know, some of my astronomy friends say it's a sheer coincidence that we're at the only time when we get to see the whole story of cosmic history. But how can you say we're also at the unique location? Now you're asking for a double coincidence. We're not only at the unique time, we're at the unique location. It seems much more rational to conclude there must be a reason or a purpose that we're at the unique time and unique location. Somebody out there wanted us to read the storybook of the universe, and there's some reason why we're to do that. That implies that we have a purpose. We can't be without purpose, if that's really the case. Then we looked at the anthropic principle. The anthropic principle tells us the entire universe, all of the universe's characteristics, all of its physics, was exquisitely designed, fine-tuned, to make possible a physical home for human beings to exist. That implies the purpose of the universe is to create a home for us. If that's the case, we must have purpose. Then we looked at the anthropic principle in equality, how it takes 14 billion years, given the laws of physics God chose, to make possible a home for human beings. It can't happen any more rapidly than that. Yet the window of time in which we can exist in a civilized state can't be any wider than a few tens of thousands of years. And we use the analogy of the wedding ceremony, which basically said the only possible philosophical implication for that, given that so much is invested in something that lasts for such a brief period of time, we human beings must have very high value and very high purpose in the eyes of the Creator. And then we went and looked at today is that we are living in a universe that's got the optimally designed physics to bring about the end of all evil and suffering. And clearly, we human beings must be center stage in God's plan to bring about the end of all that evil and suffering. Therefore, we must have purpose. Therefore, we must have destiny and ultimate hope. Now, when I was 17, 18, and 19, I studied an hour a day looking at the different religions of the world. And what I noticed in all those religions, except for the Bible, they taught that God had made one creation, that we had fallen from paradise. We were in paradise, we lost paradise, and God's on a mission to restore this creation and to restore us to paradise. What I found in the Bible was a radically different message. That it's not God making one creation and only one creation for humanity. It's a two-creation model. That he creates this universe to bring about the end of all evil and suffering, and when that evil and suffering is gone once and for all, he replaces this universe with a brand new universe. So my professor, Carl Sagan, was wrong when he said the universe is all there is or was or ever will be. We know he must be wrong because the physics of the universe itself establishes we must have hope, purpose, and destiny. And if the universe is all there is, that can't be true. God has created a new realm with radically different physics and dimensions that we'll enjoy if we choose to go there once evil and suffering are forever gone. We'll talk about that in the next session. The two-creation model, the unique two-creation model of the Christian faith, and why it alone provides an answer to the problem of evil and suffering. And in doing so, we remove the only positive argument that atheism has for its atheistic worldview. I think you all know the argument. If God is all-powerful and all-loving, He wouldn't tolerate his creatures experiencing evil and suffering. Since evil and suffering exist, such a God can't exist. But the fallacy is there's a presumption that there is no purpose for us human beings being exposed to evil and suffering. In the next session, we'll explain the benefits of us being exposed to evil and suffering for a very brief period of time.
So how's everyone doing? Did you like Hugh's shirt? Do you like mine? My wife got it for me. She said my other ones were too decayed. Okay, very interesting stuff in this last session. For instance, did you pick up on the fact that God allows just enough decay so as not to discourage us from working? Any more decay would keep us from accomplishing anything. What's the point after all? Any less decay would allow sin and evil to run rampant and totally out of control. Fascinating observations. All right, lot to discuss here, lots of provocative ideas, so go have fun with your Q&A discussion, and I'll see you at our next session.
The preceding program was brought to you by Reasons to Believe and NRB TV.
Welcome to the 1 Minute Apology.